Okay, and then something really exciting this evening is we're going to have 3 short talks from friends of mine, actually, friends of lots of people in the Sangha, are going to tell us about their practice of the Metta Bhavana. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. But before they talk, I'm just going to say a little bit to place it in the context of the theme and the series that we've undertaken so far. So exploring the theme of metta, of loving kindness. The series comes from a Pali Sutta where the Buddha says metta, he compares metta to the radiance of the sun and the moon. Says it blazes, it shines forth, it's brilliant, and outshines all other good qualities. So we're looking at this quality of loving kindness, of metta. What is it? How do we cultivate it? In particular, using the framework of a really famous traditional sutta called the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And this is a discourse from the Buddha, probably we think close to words that Buddha might have used in the language of Pali. And the Karaniya means something literally like how you need to live. And so the sutta means how you need to live, Metta Sutta, loving kindness sutta. And it's the Buddha describing how you need to live. He says at the start of the sutta, if you want to reach a state of perfect peace, this is how you need to live. And he describes how to live in a very, very practical way, very kind of inspiring, moving, simple, beautiful way, how to live. And it culminates in the Buddha saying, well, this will lead to insight, to wisdom, and to liberation from the wheel of samsara. If you live this way, you'll be liberated, you'll become enlightened, you'll become truly wise. And he says it's like you can develop a state of mind that's like living in heaven right here and now. So it sounds incredibly attractive that you can actually cultivate a state of mind that's like dwelling in heaven right here and now. So this is the Buddha telling us how we can live to dwell in these kind of states, not just something in a future life. We can live in heaven right here and now. And if we live in this way, we'll be liberated, we'll become wise, we'll develop insight. So we've heard so far from Satyajyoti the context of this very beautiful sutta. We've heard from Vimaladasa that actually the first thing the Buddha says we need to do when he tells us how to live is we need to become a capable person. Start by becoming a capable person. And we've been talking about this in terms of ethics and integration. And the Buddha describes how we can live simply, become gently spoken, flexible, avoid doing anything that wise people would criticize us for. So we can learn to live ethically and become a capable person. That's the first thing we start off by doing. Then last week we heard from Vidanya that the Buddha, the big middle section of the sutta, the Buddha describes how to cultivate metta, how to practice metta, how to cultivate it. And we've got copies of the sutta, I should say, just down behind Shubham on the CC thing down there, what it's called, the speaker. Take one of those if you missed that earlier. But there's a whole middle section. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring my glasses up, so I don't think I know it off by heart. But the Buddha describes, then you should meditate like this. May all living beings be happy. May all living beings be well. And he describes different categories of beings who are near, beings who are far away, beings who are tall, beings who are short, beings who are strong, beings who are weak, beings who are born, beings that are going to be born in the future even, you can wish well. So the Buddha is describing the principles of practicing metta that we're trying to develop an unlimited heart of friendliness, he says, for all beings. And then he uses phrases. He says, well, may these beings be well, may they be happy, may they be secure. And he uses different categories of people. And the kind of categories he suggests in the Metta Sutta are these different opposites of people, near, far, weak, strong. And over time, and he also says, he likens it to the intensity of love and cherishing that a mother experiences for her only child. He said, just like a mother would cherish her only child, it's this love, but for all beings. And he says, develop an unlimited heart of friendliness for the whole universe. And he says, do this all the time, whether you're sitting, whether you're lying down, whether you're meditating, whatever you're doing, cultivate this unlimited heart of friendliness. And this is like living in heaven right here and now. So that's the practice of cultivating metta. And in the future weeks, we're going to hear about the fruits of that, where that leads to, the insight that it leads to. But tonight, we're going to hear from 3 Sangha members about, well, how do they practice the Metta Bhavana? Because over time, Buddhist tradition has given us this practice in a particular form of you can use these phrases like the Buddha suggested. And we've inherited from the tradition 5 categories of people that we can cultivate metta towards in the Metta Bhavana practice. And Vidanya talked about this last week. And there's a very formal, traditional way of doing the practice. But also what you'll discover if you've been doing it for a while, that for different temperaments, people have different ways into the practice, different ways of unlocking those principles of caring for all beings, just as they would care for themselves or a good friend. And there's different ways into that practice. And at different times as well, you might find different ways helpful. So you can be creative with that metta practice. You can be creative with unlocking the heart, unlocking the metta practice. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what our friends have got to say this evening. These are 3 people you can tell really do practice metta in their life and on the cushion. And we can hopefully hear from them how they practice metta in different ways, and we can get some ideas from that. So we've got, first of all, Emma, then Sanghajiva, and then Pretti. And they're going to talk for 8 to 10 minutes, and Ariasaki will time them and wave something at them to tell them after 8 minutes and after 10 minutes. So I won't say anything in between. A big, suitably big flower that you'll notice. So I won't say anything in between the talks, but I'll come back up again and just kind of summarise. But let's have a big round of applause first of all for Emma.
Can I be heard? Can you hear me at the back? Hi everyone. Particularly nervous this evening, but I feel the message. Yeah, I'm just really excited to talk to you about the Metta Bhavana. Commission, I love it and have always loved it, and that is not everyone's experience, and that's fine. But I've always loved it and always wanted to do it. And actually, I remembered it was one of the reasons I wanted to come to Sri Rana, because a friend had told me about the Metta Bhavana practice, and I intuitively felt like I really wanted to do that practice. I just think it's really magical, and there's loads I could say, and I'm really worried I won't get it in time, so I'll just try and give you a brief summary. I was also really struck by Vidanya's talk last week about the sutta and this idea of purpose, and how the Metta Bhavana fits in with that. And I was just really inspired because I was thinking, well, what is my purpose? And it's wanting to live more in connection with myself, with others, and with the transcendental. And I really feel like the Metta Bhavana has been such a key tool for me working towards that. And I've reread something with colour quotes, but I wanted to start with this. Sangha says in this book, the point of cultivating metta is to bring you closer to reality. I just really love that idea. And I was really thinking about this idea of unlocking as well. I was thinking, what's unlocked the Metta Bhavana for me? And I think there's lots of things, but one of the things that stood out particularly at the moment was taking it seriously, actually, and really taking it as a responsibility. Both my effect that I have on myself and the world, and the effect the Metta Bhavana can have. So taking responsibility for how I show up for myself and others. And that has really unlocked it for me. So yeah, so the first few years of me doing the Metta Bhavana, I've really enjoyed it. It was really lovely. Like I said, I am very lucky. I find it very helpful very easy to imagine. So I'd have Amitabha in my Metta Bhavanas, and I really recommend that if you possibly can. I found that because I didn't have to do the work, Amitabha could do it for me. So it was all going well. And then there was a point in my practice a few years in where I realized that actually maybe I needed to take it more seriously. And that maybe I really want to talk particularly around the first stage, so kindness towards ourselves, that maybe that wasn't really going as deep as I needed it to. So there was a particular time in my life where I had been in a relationship and I thought it was sorted, I thought I was sorted, I thought it was all gonna, and everybody else around me thought it was sorted. He did not. And it ended quite abruptly. I was a bit blindsided by it. And around the same time, I was working in a job and there was a promotion, And I really thought I was going to get it, and so did everybody else. And I didn't get it. And both of them, I felt deeply humiliated by those experiences, disproportionately humiliated by those experiences. And that made me really curious. So I realized that actually part of the reason I was so humiliated by those experiences because I didn't really have my own back. And also that I was maybe investing more in those things in giving me a sense of love and validation than they could give me. And it's Sangha says on page 91, I've got it here, just thought he articulates this really well. He sort of says, you simply cannot develop much loving kindness towards anyone else if you're on bad terms with yourself, or if you're uncomfortable with what you find out about yourself and all your external supports and comforts are removed. When you don't have metta for yourself, you experience an emptiness, a hunger, and you look for love from someone else to fill that void and make you feel better, at least for the time being. So again, it comes to this responsibility, that I had this responsibility to myself, but also for other people, realizing that it wasn't just a luxury to have kindness towards myself, but that it was really key in how I was going to show up for myself, but also show up for other people. So yeah, I abandoned myself and I wasn't really connected. So it was suggested to me to do put myself in all the stages of the Metta Bhavana, not exclusively. It's really important to keep doing the traditional one, but so what that looks like very briefly, but please chat to me about it afterwards, is for me, the first stage would be about developing metta towards my physical self, actually my body. And then the second stage, the qualities that I appreciated about myself. The third stage, things that maybe were a bit unknown to me, unconscious. The fourth stage, things that I would find difficult about myself. And then the final stage, my sort of integrated self. And what I found particularly helpful about that process was the difficult stage, actually. Really having my back in that stage when I didn't really like myself, when I'd let myself down, when I felt humiliated, when I'd been lazy. I was particularly hard on myself when I was frightened for some reason. So really in that stage, practicing with being with myself and having my back, even when I'd acted really badly. And I actually did a ritual at that time, almost like a sort of wedding vow to myself that I would always have my own back. And what happened over time was a sort of much more of a habit of an instinct of kindness towards myself, particularly when things were difficult or I was sort of feeling a bit humiliated. So I wanted to give two sort of very brief examples of how that showed up for me. So recently, in the last 10 months or so, I've been looking for a job. And broadly up until 10 months ago, I'd got most jobs that I'd gone for, and I used to brag about that quite a lot. And then so I went to look for a job, and I was like, right, I know how to do this. And I had a lot of interviews and a lot of not getting jobs. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. And there was one particularly, which was an absolute car crash. Where they said to me, basically, we really need to get back to our lives. Can you stop talking? And I remember the Zoom, because it was on a Zoom call, it closing and just being like, really felt like I'd been hit by a car, like the sting of humiliation. But luckily, I had built up this reservoir of kindness towards myself. And actually, of course, it stung a bit. It's not ideal, but there was also, able to laugh at myself. And what I was really compelled to do was share it with other people, actually. I shared that humiliation and they shared their stories of humiliation. It was just a very connecting experience and, able to learn and just, go for more interviews. And I also wanted to share that it was in the process of a Metta Bhavana, because there's something about this responsibility to others as well. Because I think sometimes people think, that if we're too kind to ourselves or something, that we won't recognise when we need to sort of grow. And in this Metta Bhavana, I had this real moment of clarity that I had been being quite unkind to a friend, that my behaviour wasn't okay. And I got the sting. I got that sting of like, oh, that stings, that I can really see I've not been acting skillfully in that friendship. And again, I had a reservoir enough of kindness to be able to hold and stay with that sting of unskillful behaviour, to be able to look at it and share it. And I confessed to some friends. I made amends to that friend who held it really kindly and again deepened connection. Thank you. So yeah, it's been really transformative in my life. And the other thing that it's really helped me do is the fourth stage when I'm doing the traditional Metta Bhavana. Because what I've really noticed is whoever I put into that fourth stage now, that difficult person, I know that I've got enough kindness to myself to be able to hold the fact that I could have done what they've done. Maybe in different conditions at a different time. I can nearly always connect with, I could do that too. And that's really helped connection with those people in that difficult stage. But I've been able to do that because I can hold my own flawed self much more kindly. So finally, I just sort of wanted to say that the other thing that it's really served is this connection with reality, with the transcendental, because actually, whenever I'm feeling unkind towards myself or disconnected from myself or other people, I'm actually deluded. You know, that's not how things are. We are connected and we are all deserving of kindness. And yeah, I just love the Metta Bhavana for that. And I just want to end with a quote from Sanghajiva. So metta is an emotional response to others that is appropriate to reality, and to that extent it has the nature of insight. That insight is likely to be fairly mundane to begin with, insight with a small I, one might say, but eventually it can become insight with a capital I, prajna, or wisdom in the full sense. In other words, through the development of metta, you can eventually transcend the subject-object duality, and this is the ultimate goal of the wisdom seeker.
Great, thank you, Emma. A good sound at the back. Higher. Is it on? No. That's a good start. Thank you. Well, a mug of answer earlier suggested I stand here and beam at you all for 10 minutes. I'm sure you're expecting a little bit more than that, but I'm really delighted to just share a few thoughts and experiences of practicing the Metta Bhavana down the years. And I tend to do this meditation in the morning before setting off for work, and that kind of sets me up for the day. You know, I'm going to meet all sorts of beings from each of those categories of friend, neutral person, and somebody I may be out of harmony with throughout the day. So it's a perfect sort of tonic at the start of the day. Our founder, Bhante Sangharakshita, tells us that we need to practice the Metta Bhavana to strengthen our contentment. We need to be contented in the first place with ourselves, to sit down and actually direct metta inwards at ourselves. And we need all the qualities that we've been talking about over the last few weeks of uprightness, flexibility, gently spoken with a few worries, and of course contentment. That's in order to feel and express metta effectively. I really like that phrase, feel and express metta effectively. And so by practicing, we can practice the 5 precepts. We could practice a gratitude, develop a gratitude practice if we haven't already got one. The mindfulness of breathing is another meditation that we can do to bring our focus inwards rather than outwards to our sense experience. So it's going to be a whistle-stop tour of the 5 stages tonight. So stage 1, Vidanya last week exhorted us to say the words, and that's something I definitely do, because it's definitely a sense for me of not conjuring up metta through gritted teeth that actually isn't there, but it's something that is inherent in us. You know, he talked about that inherent friendliness that we all have It might be hard to spot in some people, but it is there. When I get to the phrase, may I not suffer, and I do repeat this for each of the stages, this is where I get visual and I get specific. So in terms of visualization, I visualize the 3 poisons that are at the center of the wheel of life. So they are the pig, representing delusion, the snake, representing hatred, and the cock, representing greed, each one chasing the tail of the other, driving the wheel of life around and around and keeping us trapped in samsara. And so what I do with this is that I look at the visual images of these animals, these figures, and I ask myself, is this what I want to look like? or do I look like this when I'm behaving like in the grip of one of these poisons? So trying to cultivate the opposite of any of the poisons. In the second stage, the good friend, I tend to shy away from families and partner because there's a near enemy of metta known as pema, or sticky attachment. And this is where we want something else from the other person. It kind of looks like metta, but it isn't actually metta. So the exceptions to this would be if a loved one was in a crisis or ill, maybe. But I would tend to focus on a spiritual friend or a good friend that I don't have that kind of strong attachment to. In the third stage, the neutral person, well, I like to remind myself that they desire happiness, and I try to visualize them outside of their usual situation. So if they wear a uniform, for example, try and see them out of that uniform and in a different environment, perhaps with family and loved ones. They too have loved ones that think they're wonderful. We just don't know that yet. They're neutral to us. A short story regarding the neutral person is that once I was at Padmaloka Retreat Centre, and I brought to mind in the neutral stage a person that I didn't know, who was across the room from me. And later in the day, I mentioned this to him, and I said, "Oh, I brought you to mind in the neutral person stage." In my naivety, I said, "What was that like? How did it feel?" You know, I wanted to know. Unfortunately, he said, "I was a bit all over the place. Actually, it wasn't the best one for you to direct your metta towards me." But nevertheless, it was a conversation. It was a starting point. It was a possible key to a connection. So what I would suggest to you all is that if there are Sangha members you don't know and you practice this, then well, take a risk. Take a risk in conversation and bring it up. The person we're out of harmony with, my word. Well, what I found over the last few years really is that it tends to be close friends and family. And I think this is because the relationship is invariably intense. This is where the intensity lies. And what I've been trying to do over the last few years, in fact, is sort of disentangle the bonds and family ties that exist. So what I mean by that is I try to see them more as just another human being, in a sense, rather than, this is my brother, I expect more from him. Or my sister, my daughter, sorry, I haven't got a sister. My daughter, she should treat me with more respect. You know, notice the word should and expect. You know, they're in there because these are family members and we kind of have these expectations about them. So I'm really trying to drop the should and expect in terms of friends and family. And I'm also looking at the situation from their perspective as well. I think it's very easy to look out and blame them. You know, I'm out of harmony with them. It's their fault. No, the truth is we are out of harmony. And I'm asking myself, what do they want from me? Or what am I not providing for them? So I found that this has really helped. And I'd like to quote a couple of lines from a lovely poem that you might have come across in Mitra study in the past. It's from W.H. Auden, and it's called The Loving One. And there's a couple of lines in the middle of that, wow, they're just like a mantra to me now, actually. Then they go like this. If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. And, well, I just love that, because it's kind of saying that this situation and this person hasn't been written off. I'm holding this person in sort of loving receptivity and perhaps waiting for the possibility of harmony to reoccur in the future. Yeah, a great one to take away. In the fifth stage, where we're extending metta outwards to all beings, and I personally try to visualize the world from above, looking down at land masses and oceans and rivers and so on, and trying to visualize all beings. Sometimes, though, it can be individuals, just as they come, just a random kind of flow towards me of people, and that could be whether they're friends, neutral, or people I'm out of harmony with. And one of the phrases from the Karaniya Metta Sutta I like to drop in at this stage as well is, may no one look down on another. And I particularly expressed the hope that that leaders, our leaders, could take on this wish as well, and may they not look down on others and create enmity between us. So to conclude, if we can become more contented and not overly attached to families, take a risk in communication, be the loving one, and not look down on others, as the words go in the Metta Bhavana, we will be making progress. Thank you.
Hello, great. Thank you so much, Emma, and thank you, Sanghajiva, thank you. I'm just going to breathe into my feet for a second. Yeah, so I would say the Metta Bhavana is the practice that's changed my life the most so far. So I'm really grateful to have been taught this practice and to have a chance to talk about it. And I think one of the things that helped me the most with practicing the Metta Bhavana was sort of more deeply understanding that it's a Vedana training practice. So just like in a nutshell, as a reminder about Vedana, this is that kind of feeling tone you get in the body whenever you encounter anything. So it can be positive, neutral, negative. And Vedana changes, so it can change moment to moment, it can change over years. And it's why it's so important to be embodied when you're doing the Metta Bhavana. So that's the first thing I think, is that I think when I started to practice it, it was more often in my head and very kind of imaginative, but not embodied imagination, if that makes sense. There's a little bit of a disconnect, and that had sort of consequences for the flavour of it. And then when I sort of understood that and started to practice it in more of a wholehearted, embodied way, the flavour then shifted, it sort of became deeper and more effective. So in the first stage then, just starting with, well, what is the Vedana you have at the moment towards yourself? Emma talked really beautifully about that. And again, that could change day to day, week to week. But I think that's just so important to notice. Are you on good terms with yourself at the moment, actually? And giving a bit of time for that to unfold. For myself, in my early experience of practicing, both the mindfulness of breathing and the Metta Bhavana, I was having quite a negative Vedana arising quite quickly when I started to meditate. I was getting quite panicky in meditation. And it took me sort of years to sort of work out what was going on with this, really. But what I realised was there was this fundamental thing where at that point in my life, I didn't feel safe in my body, which in short was to do with just some health issues I'd had and some times in hospital I'd had earlier in my life. So then trying to meditate and then trying to get into the body, I would just sort of have this this sort of disconnect would start to happen. And realising that was so helpful, because it's like, oh, but I am safe in my body, actually. So I sort of went back a bit, and when I started doing the Metta Bhavana, there was like a foundation stage for me, which is just the phrase, I am safe in my body. So that was like what I'd start with. relaxing into the body, becoming wholehearted and embodied. And then, yeah, I use the phrase as well, and then wishing myself well. So for anybody else who's had anything like that, where something's a bit sort of awry, it might just be needing to get more safe in the body. So I really recommend that, and certainly talk to me if that would be helpful. And then, yeah, the Vedana did change, actually. So then when I would do Metta Bhavana in the future, actually what would unfold would be very positive Vedana towards myself. There was this thing of being much more safe in the body and of turning towards myself. That Emma talked about the responsibility of doing that act. It's so true. And then actually now when I sit and do a Metta Bhavana, positivity unfolds. So that will change over time as well. And some other helpful bits to do with the first stage that I've experienced. One was, you might well know this famous image of the Buddha in his Enlightenment, where there was a stage where he was sort of being attacked. There's like kind of an image of lots of weapons sort of flying towards him. And then when they came into his aura, they turned into flower petals and then sort of rain on him. So if there's ever a time where you're doing the Metta Bhavana and maybe you're in quite a negative state of mind towards yourself, or just the words are quite sharp towards yourself or others, but for me, this is I've often done in the first stage. It's just this imagination of those sharp words turning into flower petals. I find really helpful, that image of that. And that helps me with sort of softening. And I think a really important thing is to forgive yourself for not living up to your ideals, because we all fall short of our ideals time to time. We all break precepts, but we can make amends for that. And we can forgive ourselves, and that's really important. So forgive yourself for when you don't live up to your ideals. Being upright. So in the Karaniya Metta Sutta near the beginning, it talks about being capable of being upright. And I've actually been practicing just when I walk around, just being a bit more upright in my posture. Because it makes a difference actually, how you encounter other people in the world, how you feel about yourself. I sort of imagine trying to lift my heart up a little bit more. So I quite recommend that too, just like day to day, how is your posture and how upright are you? And I found there is something that connects that to my ethical practice actually. Something like straightforward comes from just that simple shift in how I'm holding myself. And for those more mythically inclined, a really beautiful image that my friend Alex gave to me is this image of Padmasambhava putting his sort of red cloak around you, sort of wrapping yourself up in metta. And I find that a really beautiful, moving image. And that's something that I will use regularly and in the other stages for other people as well, actually. For time, I don't have much time to go into the second stage, so I'll just say, do enjoy that second stage, because what a lovely chance just to be in like some positive Vedana, you know, encountering a friend in your imagination. I just really recommend enjoying that stage. And then the third stage, I think an important thing to say is it's okay for the Vedana to stay neutral. So I talked about it being this Vedana training. Often I find that, you know, I might get a bit distracted and bored in that stage because it's neutral Vedana, and just keep coming back to it like you would in the mindfulness of breathing. Keep coming back to the person you've chosen for that stage. I think for me, I talked about early on in my Metta Bhavana practice, I'd get a bit too caught up in my head, and what I would do is invent really elaborate backstories for the neutral person. And actually what I do now is just remember there's a common humanity here, even though I have no idea about them and they're a mystery to me, but there's a common humanity and I can wish them well. And actually not a lot for me happens during that stage at all, but what I find is in day-to-day life, I see the fruits that gives because I see how I encounter people in the world. So I think the other thing to say is we often expect too much of ourselves during the practice, and a lot of the fruits unfold later. So yeah, don't be too harsh on yourself. Don't expect too much of yourself. Just showing up to do the practice gives fruits. And then in the fourth stage, so again, this really helpful teaching of just allowing the Vedana to arise. So you bring to mind somebody that you're currently having difficulty with, and it's unpleasant and it's uncomfortable, and just letting that happen. So you don't have to sort of try and bypass that, and you don't have to sort of really dredge the depths for something that's good about them so you can start to wish them metta. It's okay to feel a bit unpleasant or a bit uncomfortable for that time and still wish them well. Does that make sense? So you don't have to transform the Vedana before the kind of stage can get going. Just feel how you actually feel towards them, and you're still making a decision and an intention that you want to wish them well regardless. And that's very powerful. And what I found then, so I'm an optometrist, I work with people, I work with the public, and what I notice is when somebody comes in with quite a sort of spiky energy, or someone who's a bit defensive, something that I do sort of respond to physically, because I do Metta Bhavana regularly, rather than like shutting down and going into aversion, it's like I can hold this discomfort in my body and I can turn towards them and I can try and wish them well as our, exchange begins. So that's really shown me the effects of that. So it's okay for it to be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable, and you wish well anyway. I've not had a fat flower yet. I thought I was going to go over time, so I'm like, oh. Grace. Yes. Thank you. So actually, I wanted to say something that Shrivati said to me just this last weekend, which I thought was really helpful and powerful just to finish with, which is she talked about this idea of sometimes you might just feel like you're going through the motions. So you're doing a Metta Bhavana and you might just think, well, I'm just going through the motions, and you might be quite negative because of that. And actually, what a beautiful thing to go through the motions of doing, that you're choosing to spend some time cultivating metta to yourself, to friends, to strangers, to people you find difficult, to all living beings. Like, that's beautiful. Even if the practice feels a bit dry or that you're just going through the motions, go through the motions and do it anyway. So I'm really grateful you said that, because it's so true. So yeah, I really hope that everyone feels a bit like, yeah, Metta Bhavana, let's do more of it, because it will change your life. It does. Yeah, thank you.
A bit short on microphones at the moment, so we're sharing them like good Buddhists. Yeah, so, well, just amazing, 3 amazing talks, really. So moving and beautiful and inspiring. And I suppose what it shows is that those 3 individuals really have engaged with the Metta Bhavana practice over a number of years. So they've learned a lot about themselves and about the practice and how they need to work in the practice. So an invitation for you would be, well, do that as well. Really engage with the practice, learn about the practice, learn about what metta is, learn about what you need to do to make the practice come alive for you. And loads of insights, loads of glimpses into how that could be in very practical ways. So yeah, let's have a round of applause for the 3 speakers again.